Wow, what a great topic, Steve. Inflation. The Fed finally did it. They did $7 trillion of stimulus in 2020, both fiscally and monetarily, and boom, inflation was created, and you wrote a book about it. Now what's going to happen?
Well, what's happening is that the Federal Reserve finally realizes they have a disease on their hands. They got a real crisis on their hands after pretending for a year and a half that it's just going to go away. The amazing thing is, and we point this out in the book, which is written in a very friendly, jargon-free manner, is that last year the Fed, even though the economy is beginning to recover from the COVID lockdowns, the Fed still continued to print and create a lot of money. $120 billion of bond buying a month. How did they pay for those bonds? They paid for the money created out of thin air. Right. So now, as they say, the chickens are coming home to roost, and the Fed laid a big egg, and now it's scrambling to undo it. But I'm afraid they think the way you fight inflation is by depressing the economy. So I'm worried about an economic slowdown. These guys are guilty of economic malpractice, and they continued it in 2021. The government was spending like crazy, and the Fed was financing much of that debt. The Fed was an enabler. Now we're all paying the price for it.
No doubt about that, Steve. I'll tell you what, though, the Fed finally did it, so hats off to them on creating massive inflation, the worst inflation in history. It's impossible to inject $7 trillion into a $20 trillion economy and not expect rapid inflation, high employment, high consumerism. But they've set us up for a ginormous fall. Are we going to see a recession now because of all of this overstimulation?
Well, unfortunately, the way the Fed fights inflation is we're going to have a more economic pain. They are going to make the situation worse. The Fed believes that inflation is caused by too much economic activity. And so even though they don't say it, when they use words like, we want a soft landing, that is Fed speak for, we hope to slow the economy without too severe a downturn. But usually soft landings turn into crash landings. And so if I had more faith that the Fed knew what they're doing, I'd say we could get through this in pretty good shape. But I have no faith in the Fed at all. And they've done for what they've been doing so far. They raise interest rates, which is going to hurt the housing market and other things. At the same time, they're hurting the economy. You know, one of the best ways you fight inflation, which Reagan did, is you have a vibrant economy. And that comes from less regulation, lower taxes, and lower spending, which this government is doing the exact opposite on all fronts.
Well, on the economy, Steve, things are starting to slow down. We're starting to see that, and so where do we see the inflation tapering off? Because we know we're at 40-year highs for inflation. Things are priced to perfection right now, especially in the real estate realm. And are we going to see demand destruction, or are we going to see inflation kind of pull itself back in check before we see that demand destruction?
Well, that's in the hands, that's sadly out of our hands. We'd know how to fix it. But in terms of the Federal Reserve, they should not be trying to manipulate interest rates. Let the economy determine the amount of money it needs and meet those needs and no more. And we used to have a gold standard which worked very well despite what the myths of today. But even in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, Alan Greenspan sort of pegged the dollar informally, very informally, to gold or a basket of commodities. So that way you have some stability out there and let the economy take care of itself. And one of the things I'm hoping for after the November elections, if not before, is that Congress will take a very active role in rolling back regulations or not financing the government's obstruction of the economy. For example, they ballyhoo this great infrastructure bill, which is, only 10 cents on the dollar on that bill was for actual roads and things like that. But no sooner was that bill passed than the Biden administration reimposed rules in terms of environmental rules and other regulations that are going to delay these infrastructure projects, tie them up in thousands of pages of studies and things like that.
Jeff Small, Steve Forbes, thanks so much for being with us here on The Income Generation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Steve.